Wonderful. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks, Wallace. Thank you.
And I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow. Stay with us for Lisa Owen and Checkpoint, 5:30pm. Chris Hipkins has an announcement regarding the Northland levels. I'm back tomorrow. See you then, 3:45.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, Northland's COVID alert levels are hanging in the balance. Minister Chris Hipkins is holding a press conference in the next half hour. We will take you there live and have all the reaction. Speaking of press conferences, the Prime Minister's one in Northland today was hijacked by a heckler spouting COVID claptrap. Is this what the government's up against in the battle to get people vaccinated in one of our most unvaccinated regions? And while the focus is on COVID vaccinations, what about the other jab available at level 3? How Botox got the green light ahead of haircuts, hospitality and retail. And let's get a trot along. It's Melbourne Cup Day after all.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. I'm Marama Tipole. The running of this year's Melbourne Cup is about to start and will cross live to Flemington for a full race commentary as soon as it does. The Prime Minister shut down a media stand-up in Northland this afternoon after being repeatedly heckled. Jacinda Ardern has been in Te Tai Tokerau today promoting vaccination efforts. Several minutes into a stand-up with journalists in Rawene, she was interrupted by a member of the public firing questions at her about vaccine efficacy.
This is an issue of. This is an issue.
Not working in Israel.
Sir, I'm going to ask.
39% efficacy.
I'm going to answer the questions of the accredited media.
Also in the UK.
Sir, I will shut down the press conference if you do not cease.
The man didn't stop, so the briefing was postponed. And a government press conference on Northland alert levels has been scheduled at short notice. It's not yet known what will be announced, but COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins will front the media at 5:30. RNZ National will live stream it. Stories from up and down the country of councillors not feeling safe at work have been reaching the organisation that represents local government. Auckland councillor Josephine Bartley was threatened by 3 men at a vaccination centre on Sunday. Local Government New Zealand's chief executive, and they've just jumped in the Melbourne Cup.
And they're racing in the Lexus Melbourne Cup. Explosive Jack away fairly, the chosen one out well, with also Delphi and Pondus over on the far side. Incentivise is about 7th early as they're looking to cross over. Trelleros is also up there with Knight's Order, Floating Artist, Persan. Out deep, Grand Promenade's not too far away from the favourite. So they're right across the track here as they link onto the course proper at the 400 metres on the first round. Great House with Knight's Order, Floating Artist, Persan deeper. Incentivises 6 deep at the moment. Then came Trelleros, Cariff, Grand Promenade, the chosen one checked off heels at that stage. Delphi on the fence, Spanish Mission deeper, and they were followed by Pondus. 2 further back, Very Elegant, and then Ocean Billy, Twilight Payment. A gap in the field to Port Guillaume, Explosive Jack Salino. Well back, Master of Wine, 4 lengths, Sir Lucan, and then came Johnny Get Angry, She's Ideal. Miami Bounders last as they reached the first turn. 2,200 to go, and it's Persan leading. Strolls out a length and a quarter, and Incentivise has got over from that wide alley and sits second, the favourite, one off the fence. 3/4 of a length to Knight's Order, followed by Floating Artist. 2 lengths, Trelleros, Grand Promenade's posted 3 deep. Great House, the rails, a length and a quarter. Cariff, Spanish Mission, 3 wide with a back to follow as they head towards midway. Then came Delphi, Very Elegance, well and truly off the rails. Further back, the chosen one. Then came Pondus, Twilight Payment in the back half with Ocean Billy. Then came Explosive Jack and Port Guillaume, 2 lengths Salino. And then at the 1,600 metres, Master of Wine. Towards the back is Johnny Get Angry. Then Sir Lucan, 2 lengths to She's Ideal. Miami Bound is last in the Lexus Melbourne Cup. 1,400 metres to run. And the leader is Persan at an even speed by a length. Incentivise and Grand Promenade travels up 3 wide. Knight's Order a length away 4th. Then came one off the fence as they reached the 1150 floating artist. A length and a half Spanish Mission, Tralee Rose, Great House, Very Elegant. Then came Carif, Delphi, Twilight Payment, last year's winners, 10 off the lead. A length and a half, The Chosen One, Pondus, Port Guillaume. Two further back, Ocean Billy, Explosive, Jack Solino. Then came Master of Wine, well back with Sir Lucan, 2 lengths, She's Ideal, Johnny Get Angry. Miami Bound is battling at the end of the field. 800 metres to run, and it's Pursan just in front of Incentivize, who gets a bit closer. Grand Promenade, 3/4 of a length away, third. Behind those horses then is Floating Artist, given every possible chance. Knight's Orders regressing. Coming around the outside and getting closer is Spanish Mission, and also Very Elegant from Delphi. Tralee Rose under the whip from Great House. It's now taking the lead, Incentivize at the top of the straight. At the 400 metres, a length and a half, Floating Artist. Here's Very Elegant. She's coming home. 300 to go. The mighty mare moves up to Incentivize and races on by. Then Floating Artist, Spanish Mission. But Very Elegant at the 150. The darling of the turf has raced clear, 3 lengths Incentivize. And it's Very Elegant. 10 Group 1s. And now the greatest of them all, the Melbourne Cup. Very Elegant wins by 3.5. Incentivize, Spanish Mission, Floating Artist. A gap, The Chosen One, followed by Grand Promenade, Delphi. Back behind them, Solino, Tralee Rose, She's Ideal, Twilight Payment, Sir Lucan, Miami Bound got going late. Great House, Explosive, Jack Knight's Order, Pursan, Carif, Pondus, well back in the field. Johnny Get Angry, Port Guillaume.
And now back to the news. All-rounder Daryl Mitchell says he never expected to be opening the batting for New Zealand at the T20 World Cricket Cup. Mitchell scored 49 runs from 35 balls in the Black Caps' first win of the tournament over India and has settled into the role alongside experienced opener Martin Guptill. He's likely to fill the role again when New Zealand play Scotland tomorrow.
My game in some ways probably suits that opening role, especially in these conditions where the wickets have been challenging at times, very low and slow.
The former Island coach, New Zealander Joe Schmidt, will join the Blues coaching staff in a support role for next year's Super Rugby competition. Schmidt, a former Blues assistant coach, is returning to the team in a part-time role and will assist head coach Leon McDonald. A solo break just before the midpoint through the stage and has given Christchurch rider Campbell Pithy victory in stage 3 of the Tour of Southland. Fellow Cantabrian and two-time winner Michael Vink retains the tour leader's yellow jersey, finishing in the main bunch on the 148-kilometre stage from Riverton to Te Anau. There won't be a national football champion this year, with New Zealand football cancelling the Women's and Men's National League Championship due to the COVID alert levels in Auckland and Waikato. The Chatham Cup semi-finals and final are being moved to February due to the uncertainty as to when semi-finalist North Shore United will be able to play again. That's the news.
Temperatures rise at COP26.
Our addiction to fossil fuels is pushing humanity to the brink. We are digging our own graves.
Cows will still belch in their pastures, even if some brilliant Kiwi scientists are teaching them how to be more polite. Humanity has long since run down the clock on climate change. It's 1 minute to midnight on that doomsday clock, and we need to act now.
Up to the Minute Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Wednesday, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Long fine spells, a period of rain tomorrow morning, possibly heavy, then scattered falls. Bay of Plenty, the central North Island high country. Also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Cloud increasing today with a few showers in the east. Rain developing overnight, scattered in the west, but heavy falls for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Waikato to Taranaki, long fine spells today. Cloudy tomorrow with showers in the ranges. Whanganui to Wellington, also wider upper. Partly cloudy with isolated showers. Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy, scattered rain, mainly inland, clearing from the south tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the South Island, partly cloudy, isolated showers clearing this evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few evening showers, cloud increasing tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Marama. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The COVID-19 Minister, Chris Hipkins, will make an announcement in the next half hour about alert levels in Northland. Now, we'll go there live when it gets underway. That's the region where the Prime Minister took her vaccine push today in an area lagging behind in vaccination rates. But her media conference in Northland was derailed by a man claiming to be a journalist, making bogus claims about the vaccine. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and camera operator Angus Drever have the story from Kawakawa.
Waiata and warm welcomes for the Prime Minister and Te Tai Tokerau were rudely interrupted today.
This is an issue.
Not working in Israel.
Sir, I'm going to ask.
39% efficacy.
I'm going to answer the questions of the accredited media.
Also in the UK.
Sir, I will shut down the press conference if you do not cease.
A man claiming to be a journalist who heckled Jacinda Ardern during her press conference with misinformation about COVID eventually forced it to be temporarily called off.
Sorry, to our accredited members of the gallery here, we might move to an inside venue. Unfortunately, we've got someone who's disrupting your press conference today, so we might reconvene.
Nearby, a woman sang loudly but peacefully in protest. The pair were among a small group in Kawakawa where Ngāti Hine Health Trust was vaccinating dozens of people. Journalists relocated nearby with Te Tai Tokerau MP Kelvin Davis clearly frustrated by the interruption.
I just said that my vaccination rates are so low in Northland.
Yeah. It certainly doesn't help, does it?
Davis says the protesters think they're smarter than the virus and add to the vaccination challenge.
I don't think it helps what we're trying to do here to protect whānau, to protect whakapapa, and to have people think that what's going on is not reality. I think that they're just living in a strange world.
And the Prime Minister highlighting the small numbers in a much wider vaccine rollout.
Misinformation exists everywhere, but it is still a minority voice, a loud one, but still a minority voice. I absolutely believe that what you're seeing in New Zealand with the rates that we have, 88% of New Zealanders now having had their first dose of those who are eligible, that is far higher than what you're seeing in many other countries.
But vaccine rates here are among New Zealand's lowest, with 4 of the bottom 10 vax suburbs in the country and just 65% of the population fully vaccinated, just 48% double dose for Māori. The government today announced another $4.6 million to help iwi-led initiatives in the north. Ngāti Hine Health Trust Chief Executive Jeff Milner is determined that Rohi will reach its 90% target before Christmas, and he says he has no problem with how the government is managing resources now.
We're all wise in hindsight, and so our job is to keep an eye on the end game, is to get our Māori population vaccinated to 90%. I think as I stand here, assuming that people who have got a first vaccination will get their second, we're at about 65. So our job is to focus on what we can influence and not really dwell in yesterday's decisions that may or may not have helped that journey.
But even if Northland doesn't reach the mark, he thinks double vaccinated and tested whānau should be able to come in and out of the region.
With good protocols around vaccination status, around testing, I think Northland was well set up to look after its own communities.
Northland needs the largest number of first vaccines to reach its 90% target. Today, Moerewa man Wyatt Ngāwati doing his part with his first dose.
Well, everyone's got it. Seems compulsory, so I better get it.
But with more than 17,000 shots still required, it could be a long road to Christmas in the north.
And Nita Blake-Person joins me now live from Kawakawa. Nita, today was a bit of a snapshot of what the government is up against when it comes to the vaccine, was it?
I reckon it was. I think it is important to keep it in context. There was a small group, but a very noisy group here today, and the space you see behind me, there was probably about 50 people there. A number of them were getting vaccinated and a number of them were getting first-time vaccinated, so that's fantastic. But that noisy sentiment that we heard from those protesters, it is really loud here in the north. And I had conversations with rangatahi at several vaccination centres that were visited by the Prime Minister today, some over near the Hokianga, and they were getting first-time vaccinations. vaccinations, fantastic, that's great news. But the reason they said, part of it at least, was why they had taken some time to come to that decision was because of information they'd seen on social media. And that information they said they now know to be false, much like the claims being spouted here today. But to get through that and cut through that and have conversations to understand the truth and where the facts are, that takes time. And I think that really is a big part of the challenge that's going on here now in Northland.
And potentially Northland's, could be about to face another challenge. There is an announcement in the next 15 or so minutes. Chris Hipkins calling a hastily well-established press conference. What do we know?
Yeah, well, they don't tend to be good news announcements when they're hastily called in the theatre, does it? Northland's been out of level 3 for a couple of weeks now. We went back into level 3 when those 2 visitors came to the north and there was very little known about their movement. So we were put into lockdown to try and understand a bit more. Nothing really came to pass, and fortunately there weren't any more cases linked to that. But we have had 14 now in Northland over the last little while. Those are spread from kind of one end of the region to the other. And it may be time, given that we don't have particularly high vaccination rates, 65% of the general population, that the government has decided another lockdown is on the cards.
Thanks, Nita. Nita Blake-Person joining us from Kawakawa there. And Chris Hipkins, as mentioned, is giving a press conference at about 5:30. We'll take you there live when it happens. It's almost 5:15 now, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. E haere ake nei, the secret sealed up and screened operation going on in Auckland. We enter into a ghost mall. The Christchurch City Council is reassuring residents there's little risk of beaches becoming contaminated with untreated waste. That's despite a huge fire at a sewage treatment plant east of the city. A fire has sent giant plumes of thick, acrid smoke into the air yesterday, which could be seen right across the city, sparking a public health alert. Conan Young reports.
The fire was in the plant's 2 massive trickling filter tanks, crucial infrastructure for the city's wastewater. The council's water boss, Helen Beaumont, says the trickling filters will be out of action for several months. To ensure the city's toilets can keep on flushing, alternative ways of dealing with its sewage are now being investigated.
We may or may not get the same level of treatment, but there's other things that we can do. So we can add chemical flocculants, for example, in the sedimentation tanks and take more of that organic material out that way. Or we could turn one of our oxidation ponds over to a different process.
Ms Beaumont says the treated sewage that winds up exiting the outlet pipe nearly 2 kilometres out to sea may not be as clean as usual, and there's a chance the council will be in breach of its resource consent. She says this is allowed for due to the emergency nature of the breach and is unlikely to lead to any beach closures.
We would expect to see some change as we try different approaches and adapt the processes. We'll keep close monitor on the suspended solids, the biological oxygen demand and the dissolved oxygen. We'll keep a close eye on what's coming out the other end of the oxidation ponds to get the best possible effluent at the other end.
Yesterday, the DHB warned the elderly, young children and those with lung or heart conditions to remain indoors to protect themselves from the smoke. Even this morning, residents were being asked to keep their windows shut. Yesterday, Becky Young told RNZ she initially thought her home was on fire.
It's polluted chemical type smoke.
Are you worried at all for your health or anything?
Maybe if you didn't have a mask on, it wouldn't be too good. Yeah. Just inhaling all the fumes.
Rachel Robinson struggled to keep the smoke out of her weatherboard home and noticed the smell even with all of the doors and windows closed.
It's very toxic, yeah, and it sort of catches in your throat.
What time did you notice it?
Around about 3:20 is when we noticed the sirens, yeah, but it was really, really black, even coming over the house, you know, it just covered up the sun and everything.
As of midday, the fire was out, with a small crew of firefighters dampening down hotspots. Fire and Emergencies Incident Commander Dave Berry told Morning Report the smoke had died down enough by this morning to allow schools to resume as normal.
When the roof collapsed, it actually sealed it off a wee bit, so we've had hard work to get access into it, but the smoke and everything has reduced considerable.
Dave Berry says it's yet to be determined if contractors working on the roof when the fire broke out had anything to do with causing the inferno. Helen Beaumont from the council says it's too early to say how much it will cost to repair the damage or how long it will take before the plant is back up and working at full capacity.
Ho mai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. Let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Do get in touch. We're expecting a press conference from the COVID Response Minister at 5:30. That is to discuss alert levels in Northland. Pātui mai, text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can flick us an email, checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Hidden entrances and covert click and collect handovers, a secret world is operating inside Auckland's malls. At many, staff are on site and customers can come inside to pick them up. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went for a look around the ghost mall that is Sylvia Park as it braces for an onslaught of shoppers next week.
The mall music blares out, but there's no hustle and bustle. Some shops lay almost abandoned, screens covering what would usually be displays. Behind the glass in other stores are neat rows of products, with staff busy packing up items for people to come and collect.
This is Sylvia Park at Level 3 Phase 1. It's pretty quiet here, aside from a few customers picking up their click and collect orders that didn't want to face those postage delays. But levels are cordoned off from each other, and it was hard to find an entrance that was actually open. What would usually be bustling escalators are cordoned off. You can actually take your pick at where you'd like to park.
Inside men's clothing store Rembrandt, store manager Ernesto Costello is tidying up a display of shirts and pocket handkerchiefs.
We've been coming since we went to Level 3, Monday to Saturdays, to receive a stock, to dispatch a stock.
But with no foot traffic at the mall and some confusion around the way it works, customers have often chosen to collect from other stores.
They are in a main street, so it's a little bit different because clients can go to the door and if they want one of the pair of shoes that we sell, they can see on the website, they don't need to try. But in the mall it's difficult because no one can come here.
But next week the doors of the mall might be able to swing open again, so long as masks are worn and distancing is in place. Ernesto's a bit worried about how it'll work.
It's going to be hard because, as I said, we're waiting from head office to put a plan how we're going to deal, but we don't have a personal security every shop to stop people coming. So we will see what's happening the first day.
A few stores over and the waft of cosmetics store Lush is as strong as ever. Colourful bath bombs are being unpacked, whilst others clean ahead of opening next week. Trainee manager Jordan Etches says they've had to find new ways to engage with customers.
It's been a bit of a struggle with sales, but we've just been really trying to amplify our social media presence, things like Instagram, just to try and get as many sales and still be able to offer great service to our customers, but obviously being contactless.
They're confident they can make things work under the new restrictions. A staff member will be dedicated to making sure customers keep to their 2-metre distance.
We would have a staff member located at the front of the store, welcoming and giving each customer a safety briefing before they enter the store, just to ensure that we are following guidelines and keeping staff and customers as safe as possible. And then just keeping an eye on the amount of people we can allow in our store.
Samples will be done using popsicle sticks, and they'll also keep lids on products to reduce contact with customers. After 11 weeks of dwindling click and collect orders, they're thankful for some relief just in time for the festive season.
This is our busiest time of year. So for us to be able to open right in what would be our peak season is definitely a blessing.
But do the people making the most of the ghost mall want the usual throng of people to return?
For me it's fine, no problem. I think we really need this, the retail really need this.
I think it's a good move for New Zealand and Auckland especially because everybody is feeling like they are staying home and it's a new start for everybody and hope for the best. Yep, I think we will enjoy it.
A little bit anxious because I just want to say that the customers who are coming in, they should be properly vaccinated. Otherwise, we will not feel safe serving them. Yeah, that's all about. Like, if they are vaccinated, they will come to our store, we will greet them, but they should be properly vaccinated. And we will all keep our distance, for sure, to keep it safe, yeah.
With a penciled-in reopening date for next week, it's unlikely this mall will stay deserted for much longer.
And if you're listening on radio, we'll chuck that up on our Facebook page so you can check out the video from Louise and Marika. It is 23 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and we will cross to that live press conference at 5:30 as soon as it starts. Flemington Racecourse has welcomed back 10,000 punters for this year's running of the Melbourne Cup. The famous race was won by a Kiwi-bred horse, Very Elegant, ridden by a New Zealand jockey. And the COVID restrictions have been lifted just in time for the race that stops the nation. Well, joining us now is ABC Melbourne reporter Elias Kleur. Elias, we'll claim this one, won't we? The Kiwis, we win.
Well, you should, and down to the spelling of the mare Very Elegant, because it's spelled with a Kiwi accent, E-L-L-E-E-G-A-N-T. So I think it's pronounced elegant, as you guys would say it there across the ditch. But yes, a Kiwi jockey on board, James McDonald, and Chris Waller is actually a New Zealander originally as well. The horse was foaled in New Zealand, has been training in Australia. But absolutely, this is a win for the New Zealanders. A lot of New Zealanders involved in the ownership as well. So this is quite an extraordinary win. Now, Very Elegant was paying $15 pre-race, but it's 10th Group 1, including a Caulfield Cup. So it's had quite an outstanding career in Australia, culminating now with the race that stops the nation.
Elias, once a Kiwi, always a Kiwi, so we will take that win. Was it same, but kind of different with the way the crowd operated? What was the feel like?
Well, there were 10,000 people down at Flemington today, all split up in 3 different zones, and people were telling us it was almost like being at a regional race meeting because, of course, Flemington usually seats about 120,000 people, and for the Melbourne Cup, usually 90,000 people are attending. So this is the first time we've had crowds there since the crowds at the Melbourne Cup there since the 2019 Melbourne Cup. Of course, last year there were crowds permitted initially and they reversed the decision. So I think there was a sense of excitement here in Melbourne that they were able to get a crowd there at all. And you could hear the roar towards the back end of the straight there when Incentivised, which was the pre-race favourite, paying $2, perhaps the shortest since another Kiwi horse, Farlap, as Incentivised was sort of front-running, moving into second and first, and then Very Elegant just came home strong, and that roar in the crowd from the lawn and the Victorian Racing Club members in the stands was quite loud, given that it's a fraction of the usual crowd we see there.
Elias, was everyone on course? Did they all have to be double vaccinated? Jockeys, people watching, the whole shebang?
That's right. So, yeah, every attendee, every jockey involved had to be double vaccinated. They relaxed some of the restrictions on course, including mask wearing outside. But, yes, everyone had to be double vaccinated. Now, it was interesting that we saw some international trainers be allowed in what they called the racing hub, including Joseph O'Brien, a prominent Irish trainer. However, the restrictions around international travel, as you guys would know, has been relaxed here in Australia anyway. So we saw a few more international trainers here than we did last year, obviously. But restrictions, I guess, were as strict as they could have been, given that Melbourne, which has been the most lockdown city in the world over 270 days, is starting to open up and, I guess, live with COVID.
Elias, just quickly before you go, what was the prize pool?
$8 million, and the winners take home $4.4 million. So if anyone sees the owners of Very Elegant back in Auckland or Wellington, drinks on them.
Apparently Kiwis can fly. Elias Kleur there live. Live from the Melbourne Cup there, and as mentioned, the horse, well, it's got Kiwi breeding, and the jockey is a New Zealander as well. A casual comment from the British Prime Minister about belching cows has put work by clever Kiwi scientists onto the world stage at COP26, and for the second day in a row, New Zealand climate activists have had a major platform at the UN Climate Summit to advocate for Indigenous peoples. RNZ's climate reporter Hamish Cardwell has more.
It was a characteristically colourful speech from UK Prime Minister and COP26 host Boris Johnson. Amidst apocalyptic warnings about the cost of inaction on climate change, a sweet shout-out to some New Zealand scientists.
2 weeks from now, smokestacks will still belch in industrial heartlands. Cows will still belch in their pastures, even if some brilliant Kiwi scientists are teaching them how to be more polite.
It may have been off the cuff, but it's delighted Kiwi researcher Lindsay Matthews, who is part of an international group of scientists teaching cows more polite bathroom habits. They're toilet training them so the urine and the nitrogen it contains can be captured.
Well, I think that's wonderful that he's recognised some brilliant Kiwi science. So yeah, that's a big win, I guess.
But it is in emissions from both ends of the cow that New Zealand is an innovator. The Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre in Palmerston North is conducting a range of experiments to slash methane from burping cows. The centre's director, Harry Clark, says the attention is pleasing.
It really is always lovely that your work is recognised, and I think we've got to thank successive New Zealand governments for their foresight.
Harry Clark says the work could slash emissions from individual animals by more than 30%, which is welcome given New Zealand's goal to nearly halve methane by 2050. Day one of the two-day Leaders Summit ended on an up note, a pledge from 100 countries to end deforestation by the end of the decade. And some big polluting countries also made new emissions reductions pledges, but there were fishhooks in most of them. India's net zero promise takes effect decades too late. Tricky accounting makes Brazil's pledge actually an increase. And US President Joe Biden reiterated an earlier promise he lacks the votes to make happen. New Zealand-based Pacifica climate activist Brianna Fruin says if the heads of state at the COP26 climate summit fail, the people will step up.
I believe that COP is like a compass, that we're all in a collective canoe, and if we're able to get COP right, we can be pointed in the right direction. But at the end of the day, my ancestors traveled the oceans without compasses. So if COP doesn't work, the people will.
Brianna Fruin says Pacific countries are already living the reality of climate inaction. But she says Pacific people are not victims of the climate crisis, but beacons of hope.
This is our warrior cry to the world. We are not drowning, we are fighting. This is my message from Earth to COP.
The second and final day of the Leaders Summit starts later tonight, New Zealand time.
And that was Hamish Cardwell reporting. E te iwi e haere nei I a checkpoint. The COVID-19 Minister Chris Hipkins will make an announcement in the next few minutes about alert levels in Northland. Now, we'll take that announcement live and have reaction as soon as it happens. Don't forget, we'd love to hear from you. Homai o whakaro. You can send us your feedback by text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins is to hold a media conference at any moment in Parliament to discuss alert levels in Northland. There was one new COVID-19 case in Northland today, a household contact of an existing case. We'll go to the media conference when it begins. The Prime Minister was earlier repeatedly heckled by a member of the public in Northland, forcing her to temporarily hold her own media conference. Jacinda Ardern had been in Te Tai Tokerau promoting vaccination efforts. She says vaccination opponents are a small minority but very vocal. Local government New Zealand says violence and abuse towards council members is on the rise. Auckland councillor Josephine Bartley was threatened by 3 men at a vaccination centre on Sunday. The Chief Executive of Local Government NZ, Susan Freeman Green, says the country is losing its ability to openly discuss issues that affect the community. She says it's part of a trend to attack the person, and that will stop people from standing for local office. A man on bail for attending an anti-lockdown protest in Auckland has been bailed again after attending a second demonstration and breaching his release conditions. 57-year-old Paul Thompson has been charged with failing to comply with a COVID-19 order by attending a rally, and we'll interrupt across now to that media conference.
Kia ora koutou, everybody. Sorry to bring you in so late. As reported earlier, there was one new case in Northland today. The case is a household contact of the case that was reported today. Despite extensive case interviews and contact tracing over the last 24 to 48 hours, our contact tracing teams have not been able to find an epidemiological or person-to-person link with any other cases in Northland. Furthermore, these two cases are based in Taipa in the far north, so are geographically quite separate from the other Northland cases, which are centred around Kaipara, Kaikohi, and have locations of interest in Whangarei, Kaiwaka and Wellsford. The two new cases have not been near any of those locations, nor come into contact with any of the other cases in the Northland outbreak, so it's unclear at this point how they could have possibly picked up the virus. This means that there is a strong possibility that there is one or more missing links in the chain of transmission, and that means that there could be undetected community transmission occurring right now in Northland. So on the basis of public health advice, including from the Northland Public Health Team, we've decided to move the northern part of Northland into Alert Level 3 from 11:59 p.m. tonight through to midnight on Monday, while we do some extensive testing, contact tracing, in an attempt to find any missing link. The decision will be reviewed by Cabinet on Monday. However, in order to minimise the unnecessary disruption to the whole region, we're putting in place a boundary which will run through the centre of Hokianga Harbour to the Mangamuka Junction on State Highway 1, to the Kaio River Bridge on State Highway 10 and East Bay. Below this boundary line, the rest of Northland will stay at Alert Level 2. Moving the northern part of the northern region to Alert Level 3 is the same step that we've taken with other previous cases where there's been no known source of infection. Using these localised arrangements has also worked previously to help stop any spread, for example, in the Upper Hauraki and more recently in Waikato. Alert level restrictions remain an important tool for us to protect communities from COVID-19 while we get those vaccination rates up. Northland's vaccination rates do remain lower than the rest of the country. At just 79% for first doses, the region has the most vaccines of any DHB in the country still to deliver before it reaches 90% on first doses. These lower rates of vaccination make the risk of an outbreak that much greater, especially amongst the 11,000 Māori in the region who are still unvaccinated. It is our goal to avoid future lockdowns once we get to that 90% marker. So I again encourage anyone and everyone in Northland, or elsewhere in the country for that matter, who's not yet taken up the opportunity to be vaccinated, to do so. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, the restrictions in Auckland are keeping COVID-19 out of the rest of the country at the moment, but it won't stay like that indefinitely. We need people to get the vaccine before the virus reaches them first. There are vaccination sites all across Northland that will be open tomorrow, and there's also testing available throughout the region. Northland's about 17,120 doses short of reaching that 90% target. There is the capacity and the vaccines available to reach that target in Northland over the coming days if people simply come forward to be vaccinated. There is nothing stopping the Northland region hitting that target. The vaccine's free, it's safe, it protects you and your whānau and your friends. With summer fast approaching, the vaccine means we can get back to our normal way of life and enjoy the best that Northland has to offer without restrictions as soon as possible. Jessica.
Sorry if I missed this right at the beginning, but what's making you most concerned? What's prompted you to go to level 3 for parts of Northland?
It is the fact that it is an unlinked case and there is no clear or even probable source of the infection, which means that there will be potentially missing links still out there, still potentially infectious, and there could be chains of transmission that have not yet been detected. And so while we do that work, we want to keep the lockdown as localised as possible, so not place parts of the region into level 3 where there isn't a good case to do that at this point. But we do need to identify whether there's any further transmission out there. I'll let Jessica and then I'll come to Tony.
The Prime Minister has been in Northland today. When were you first alerted to this, and how is she impacted by this?
The Prime Minister wasn't in the area that we're moving into alert level 3. With her travels, the Prime Minister does travel around the country. The Prime Minister is very careful in terms of the nature of activities that she undertakes. So at this point, there's no additional risk there. The Prime Minister's not been in contact with any potential cases, not been in those areas where there is concern or greater concern at this point.
And that is COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins. And just to recap there, the northern part of Northland will go into alert level 3 from 11:59pm this evening. This is because there are 2 cases that the Minister says they are unable to link to other cases in the area. They're concerned that there could be community spread that they are unaware of, that these 2 cases have not been to the same places as the other cases, and they can find no epidemiological link between these 2 most recent cases and others, and they are based around the area of Taipa, these new cases. So let's bring in Far North Mayor John Carter. John, this come as a bit of a shock?
Well, quite honestly, it's disappointing, but it's the right decision, and we need to keep people safe. That's the first thing. We need people to be sensible, to keep their distancing, to wear their masks, Lisa. We also need them to be tested if they're unwell, and most importantly, please go and get vaccinated. That's the reason why we have to do this, is because we need to get our vaccination level up.
So the border there that's going to be put in place, as outlined by Chris Hipkins, is it's around the Hokianga Harbour and through the Mangamoka Junction. Is it in the right place, or should more of Northland be in level 3?
And it's across. It goes from the Hokianga Harbour through the Umawera Valley and through the Whangaroa Harbour. It's the most sensible way in which to ensure that we can police the border. There's generally 2 roads, and so it's the most practical thing to do under the circumstances. Lisa, can I just say that because of what's happened in the last 2 days, people are frightened. It will have a negative impact on our businesses. But because there was concern in the district that there was COVID anyway, people were concerned and businesses were already being affected. We're hoping that this will give us a breathing space. We're hoping that we will be able to make sure that we've got a link, and that Cabinet will reconsider this on Monday.
So obviously you've mentioned the vaccination rates. They aren't great compared to other areas, and the Minister mentioned just then, I think it was 11,000 Māori still unvaccinated in the region. What's the barrier here, John?
So we just need to be getting out more personally to the people, and we are. The iwi leaders are working their butts off. Our whānau are starting really to focus on it now. Our community, our health board, everybody's holding hands, working hard together. It's taken us just a little while to get there, but we are there now, and hopefully we'll see, and we already are, but hopefully we'll see a continued increase in the vaccination rate, and of course the testing and all that stuff, Lisa, as well.
For people who aren't familiar, John, tell us about Taipa.
Taipa, it's a lovely area. It's a place where you should come and visit. It's a place where you can relax. It's lovely, great people, and of course it's Northland, so it's the best place in the world.
But in terms of health facilities, John, and what's nearby, what is there?
Oh, well, of course we've got Kaitaia, which is half an hour away from health. There are areas where we can, we're setting up, the DHB are setting up testing stations and vaccination points in areas like that, so that we can make sure that people have the opportunity to be tested and vaccinated. And so the facilities are there. And of course, down the road's Whangarei, so and also the Kawakawa Hospital.
So, John, while we've been talking, a text has come in. It says, not sure how this is going to work. Taipa goes to Kirikiri for shopping south of the Kaiol Bridge, this listener is saying. So that means that instead for the next 3 or 4 days, they will need to come to Kaitaia. Okay. Now, the border, how easy is it going to be policed? You said maybe two main exit areas there. And what are you saying to people about, sticking to the rules.
Yeah, well, look, borders are always challenging, and the resourcing is going to be a challenge for our police force, who have done a great job for us up till now, and they will continue to. But we also ask and rely on the people being sensible. And, of course, there is, unfortunately, there's always those in our society that aren't. But most of our people, I'm pleased to say, will be sensible and will respect it. And so for your shopping, for an interim, come to Kaitaia and shop there.
And John, midnight Monday is when the review is going to happen. Do you think that is too soon?
No, not at all. It will depend very much on what happens from a health perspective. If we're able to arrange a link between the couple of people who have got COVID and somewhere else, then of course we can be treated like the rest of New Zealand. The problem at the moment is we don't have enough information.
Early days, but have you talked to anyone from Taipa, or do you know the whānau involved?
No, I don't. Well, that's not true. I know of them. I don't know them personally, but they've been hugely cooperative, just like the people in Kaikoura and so on, and that's why it is that we can make the decisions we have for the safety of all of us.
Nice to talk to you, John. That is Far North Mayor John Carter. It is about 16 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Now, to talk through this further, I'm joined by epidemiologist from the University of Auckland, Professor Rod Jackson. Rod, what do you make of the decision to lock down just the north, the top of Northland, until midnight next Monday?
I think this is the model of what we're going to see over the next 6 months. It's going to be localised lockdowns. I mean, Northland's the obvious place. You might think it's an overreaction, or some of the listeners might think it's an overreaction with a couple of cases. But I think Chris Hipkins hit the nail on the head, is that if it's not linked, if we can't link it, it means there's other cases out there. And Northland has the worst vaccination rates in the country, well, equally bad to Tairāwhiti. And we really need to get those vaccination rates up. I mean, we knew this was going to happen, I think, and it's really sad that it's happened in Northland.
So, Rod, localised lockdowns is what you do when you have, as you've pointed out, a pocket where there's not strong vaccination rates, right? But they might be bordered by stronger areas. The point here is the whole of Northland has poor vaccination rates. So does that lockdown area go far enough?
Maybe not. We'll find out in the next few days, I guess. And I think, as I said, this is the model of what's going to come. I mean, COVID crosses boundaries. If people cross boundaries, and I think that it's going to be, to excuse the expression, suck and see. The people have sent the government the message that we don't want widespread lockdowns everywhere. They're not sustainable. I think we're going to see more and more local lockdowns to try to keep the virus suppressed. I think that's what we're going to do. COVID, as soon as we open up more widely, COVID will spread across the country. It will seek out unvaccinated people. Depending on how many there are, will impact on how badly our health services cope. And with Northland being the least vaccinated region of the country, or equally as bad as Tairāwhiti, we need, I think this is the most appropriate response.
Okay, so what would you need to allay fears? So it's going to be reviewed on Monday, and at the moment the Minister is telling us they can't find any link with the existing cases. What do we need to plug the gaps here so that we have some sense of safety?
Well, we need to find the cases. I mean, I've been quite surprised. Remember those early cases in Northland, those two women who went north and we didn't know where they've gone? I mean, I've been wondering all along. I mean, I don't have this information, but I've been wondering all along whether they actually set off a chain of transmission and those people have kept under the radar. Now, I might be wrong there. This is this is a few weeks now. But that was my initial concern, is that there have been people out there who have been infected who just haven't come forward. I don't know. But look, Northland, this is a wake-up call. Northland, we know it's got a problem. We know that this is all about access. This is access to trustworthy information. I mean, we saw the Prime Minister today being heckled by a white American right-wing person. I mean, these are the people who are providing many people in Northland with their information. This is not trustworthy information. They haven't got trusted, they don't trust the health services, a lot of people. We need to actually give the resources to their trusted leaders to get out there and get them over the line with vaccination. I see that John Tamahiri won his case in court today, and so he's going to be sending, I think, buses and other groups up to Northland. Let's hope that the people in Northland trust John and his colleagues around the north and get over the line and start actually listening to trustworthy Māori leaders rather than right-wing Americans.
So, Rod, this border that they're putting in place, and John Carter says there's probably two main access points in and out, right? How hard does this border need to be? Because we've seen exemptions and people passing over when they shouldn't in other parts of the country. But given what we know about Northland, how strict does this boundary need to be?
Well, I've been saying for a long time that if you're going to have a border, it should be a hard border. I wouldn't let anyone over the border unless they're double vaccinated and have had a rapid test, because otherwise it makes a mockery of a border.
Good to talk to you, Rod. That is Professor Rod Jackson, epidemiologist, and from the Auckland University there. Just to catch you up if you're just joining us, there is a level 3 lockdown from 11:59 tonight in the northern part of Northland. Now, a boundary is going to be established. It'll be put in place from the centre of Hokianga Harbour to the Mangamoka Junction on State Highway 1 to the Kaiō River Bridge on State Highway 10 and East Bay. Now, below that boundary line, the rest of Northland will stay at level 2. Above that boundary goes into level 3 tonight. It'll be reviewed again next Monday. Now, this is because of 2 cases in Taipa, and the Minister has said they're not able to link them to the other cases in Northland, which seem to be separate and have centred around the Kaipara and Kaikoi area. The 2 new cases haven't been to any of the locations of interest, and there is a strong possibility, the Minister says, that there could be missing links and undetected community transmission. And because Northland has very poor vaccination rates, 79% first doses, 65% second doses, they are taking a precautionary approach. Now, locations of interest that have already appeared: Bell's Produce, Kaitaia, Saturday the 30th of October from 10:45 to 11:15. Farmers Kaitaia, Friday the 29th of October, 12:20 to 1:30. And the Awanui Hotel, Awanui, Sunday the 31st of October, 5:30 to 7:30. Check out the Ministry of Health website for locations of interest for all the details. Local government New Zealand says it's hearing more and more stories of council members feeling unsafe because of their line of work. Auckland councillor Josephine Bartley of the Mongakeke Tamaki ward was verbally abused at a vaccination centre over the weekend. She says she was shaken but is determined to carry on with her work. Chen Liu reports.
Josephine Bartley visited Pacifica Family Health Group in Panmure on Sunday after its shop front window was smashed by a man with, according to the police, personal health issues. The Panmure Clinic is operating as a vaccination centre. She says she'd finished dropping off some food and speaking with staff when back at her car she was approached by 3 men. She says the men were calling her scum and also threatened to vandalise her car.
I don't get shaken easily because I've had people unhappy with me before, but never like this.
She says she has been advised not to attend events alone and to stop using her car because, like many elected representatives, it has her photograph and name on it.
That puts me at risk even more. So yeah, and just to be really careful out there. So I'm just going to carry on, but I won't be using my car, but I will carry on.
Auckland Mayor Phil Goff told First Up there should be zero tolerance for that kind of behaviour.
Then to threaten a councillor who's working her heart out to try to get as many people in her community as protected as possible, that's not just disgraceful behaviour, that's criminal behaviour.
Manukau Ward councillor Alf Filipina says it was cowardly and he hopes the perpetrators will be found and held to justice. He says he appreciates people have different opinions, but this isn't how they should be expressed.
Let's have a debate where there is courtesy and room to listen to each other's views. You don't need to resort to violence, whether it be against threats or physical damage, willful damage.
Chief Executive at Local Government New Zealand, Susan Freeman-Grain, says Ms. Butley has been doing amazing work to encourage Pacifica to get vaccinated, work that saves lives. She says it's a sad situation as it's part of a growing trend to attack the person, not the issue.
Sadly, we're hearing more and more that our members and members of our local government whānau generally are feeling unsafe. They're receiving intimidation and abuse, which is such a problem.
Ms. Freeman-Grain says local officials are dedicated and passionate and are doing incredible work for their community, especially during the pandemic. She says such behaviour has a broader impact on civil discourse, preventing people from taking up a public role.
We're losing our ability to have honest, mature conversations on the actual hard issues. And that is having some broader impacts, like it's stopping people speaking up, it stops people standing for these really important roles.
Ms. Freeman-Grain says her organisation is considering how to support councillors' well-being. She also says everyone has a responsibility to think about how they communicate with their community leaders, council staff, elected members and councillors. The police say they take any and all reports of offending seriously and will investigate as appropriate.
Southern DHB is preparing for the worst for next year if COVID-19 becomes endemic in the community. The DHB says COVID is the single biggest risk to both the community and itself, saying it could overload the health system. The region's celebrating a milestone today, hitting a 90% rate for first doses of the Pfizer vaccine. But the DHB says COVID remains the single biggest risk to both the community and itself, saying it could overload the health system. At a meeting today, board members discussed the latest modelling and what it means for their community. Tess Brunton has more.
The worst-case scenario modelling paints a grim picture for a health system already under pressure. It would see close to 900 people infected with COVID-19 every week. 40 people would need to be hospitalised and up to 4 would need intensive care. It's just one of 3 scenarios for the southern region using government modelling, but all are based on the 90% double vaccination rate. Chief Executive Chris Fleming says it's vital preparations are made so planned care is not jeopardised.
The new number one strategic risk is COVID endemic. I think this is a significant issue and we must take it seriously, and other priorities will fall by the wayside if we have to let them fall by the wayside to ensure that we are responding appropriately and adequately.
A steering group and a governance group are being created to tackle the issue and will meet regularly. Dr. Hugh Lloyd is leading the DHB's planning and outlined the different scenarios at today's meeting based on public health controls: tight, loose with a more relaxed border, or unmitigated. The only variable is the percentage of the population who are exposed, with the strictest scenario preparing for 1% of the population exposed, 36% for loose and 62% for unmitigated scenarios.
If we remained with tight lockdown type scenarios, then there's a significant drop off in the numbers. So overall, we would only expect 50 hospitalisations if we remained. But clearly, these measures are completely socially unacceptable.
Dr. Lloyd says the DHB's plan uses Dunedin Hospital as the base for all COVID-19 admissions, with Southland and rural facilities being used for testing and holding patients awaiting transport.
And therefore, Dunedin Hospital has to have the capacity to deal with all the southern cases. And transport capacity and capability needs to be in place to be able to deliver that model. And in an unmitigated scenario, Dunedin would require 3 COVID wards and have very limited capacity to do non-COVID cases.
He says it's important to start preparing, as they'll need an effective public health system, including good contact tracing.
The number one effect during containment is having an effective public health service doing tracking and tracing and isolation. And if we don't have enough capacity in that space, then the likelihood of that unmitigated scenario happening is much, much higher.
The board's chair, Pete Hodgson, says the modelling serves as an important reminder about what could happen, and the public needs to step up and get vaccinated.
Our mitigation will be dependent on the health system, but it'll be dependent on society. And, I just want to use every opportunity I have to say that this is a thing that doesn't involve the health system alone.
Today, the board passed a resolution saying it's determined to double vaccinate at least 90% of each ethnic group, age group, and urban and rural community in the southern region.
If you are just joining us, bring you up to date at 11:59 tonight, the north of Northland is going into an alert level 3 lockdown. This is because of some unconnected cases. There's 2 from the same household, one discovered yesterday, one today. Some of you have been asking about where you can get tests because the COVID response minister is wanting lots of tests so they can make sure that there is no undetected community spread. So, Kiri was the question. There is testing services at Kiri Med Doctors Partnership. That's from 8 till 5 on weekdays, it appears. Doctors Kiri 8 till 5 p.m. and the Northland COVID-19 Community Testing Centre open between 9 and 4. So those are testing options in Kiri. The boundary that's being put in place is from the centre of Hokianga Harbour to the Mangamuka Junction on State Highway 1 to the Kaior River Bridge on State Highway 10 in East Bay. Now, below that boundary line, the rest of Northland stays in Alert Level 3. Above it, Alert Level 3 below, and above that line, they're moving to Level 3 at 11:59 tonight. There are going to be police keeping an eye on that border. So these 2 cases are in Taipa, and they can't be linked at this stage to the other cases. Total number of Northland cases to date, I believe, is 14, but the other cases have been around Kaipara and Kaikoi, and the 2 new cases have not been to the same locations of interest. Speaking of which, keep an eye on the Ministry of Health website. There are already 3 locations of interest: Bell's Produce Kaitaia, Farmers Kaitaia and Te Awanui Hotel.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. The northern part of Northland is to go into Alert Level 3 from midnight tonight till at least next Monday. The region had just 1 new community case of COVID-19 today, a household contact of an existing case in the far north township of Taipa. But COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says despite extensive efforts, contact tracing teams have not been able to find an epidemiological link.
This means that there is a strong possibility that there is 1 or more missing links in the chain of transmission, and that means that there could be undetected community transmission occurring right now in Northland.
A boundary will run through the centre of the Hokianga Harbour across the Mangamuka Junction on State Highway 1 to the Kaior River Bridge on State Highway 10 and East Bay. The Prime Minister was visiting Northland today but was not in the affected area. The Speaker of the House has dropped the requirement for MPs returning to Parliament from Level 3 areas to isolate for 5 days. Some have had to isolate for a week before returning to Parliament, on top of testing negative like other essential workers. The Speaker's office has confirmed MPs will now only be required to return a negative test result within 72 hours of leaving a Level 3 area. New Zealand-bred horse Very Elegant has won the Melbourne Cup. The 6-year-old mare was ridden to victory by former New Zealand jockey James McDonald, winning easily from race favourite Incentivise. And there'll be more on the race later in this bulletin. House prices unexpectedly rose last month. CoreLogic's index shows the average national price rose by 2.1% to just over $970,000 after slowing over the previous 5 months. Research head Nick Goodall says COVID lockdowns seem to have reduced property listing at the same time as demand remained buoyant. The average national price was up by nearly 29% over the past year, with record highs in major cities like Auckland and Christchurch. The Climate Change Minister says he has reassured Pacific countries that have not been able to make it to COP26, he'll do his best to amplify their positions in the negotiations. Because of COVID-related travel restrictions, only 4 Pacific Islands leaders have been able to make it to Glasgow. James Shaw also says it's difficult for Pacific nations to participate virtually because of the number of meetings held simultaneously and away from main conference rooms.
And so we sort of have said, look, we will do what we can to amplify the positions that your governments hold, recognising we can't speak on behalf of any other government other than our own, but just to make sure that the kind of messages that are coming through from the Pacific are not missing from the table.
Stories from up and down the country of councillors not feeling safe at work have been reaching the organisation that represents local government. Auckland councillor Josephine Bartley was threatened by 3 men at a vaccination centre on Sunday. Local Government New Zealand Chief Executive Susan Freeman-Green says violence and abuse towards council members is on the rise.
We're losing our ability to have honest, mature conversations on the actual hard issues. And that is having some broader impacts, like it's stopping people speaking up. It stops people standing for these really important roles.
Susan Freeman-Green says it's part of a trend to attack the person, not the issue. A man on bail for attending an anti-lockdown protest in Auckland has again been arrested for taking part in another rally. 57-year-old Paul Thompson has been charged with failing to comply with a COVID-19 order by attending a rally in the Domain on Saturday. He was already on bail after being charged with attending a Domain protest on October the 16th. In the Auckland District Court today, Mr Thompson pleaded not guilty to breaching bail and was remanded on bail until a hearing in January. University of Auckland students, staff and visitors will need to be double vaccinated by January the 4th if they want to set foot on any of the university's campuses next year. Vice-Chancellor Dawn Freshwater says the decision is firmly based on public health advice, and while some may feel it impinges on their freedom, no one is being forced. It's 4 minutes past 6. As you just heard in the news, the New Zealand-bred Very Elegant has stormed home to win the Melbourne Cup at Flemington. The 6-year-old mare, trained by expat New Zealander Chris Waller, is Australia's reigning Horse of the Year. She's the first New Zealand horse to win the Cup since Prince of Penzance in 2015. Jockey James McDonald was almost lost for words after Very Elegant crossed the line 3.5 lengths in front.
I love it a bit. She's been going so good to me. She was relaxed the whole way. When I looked up at about the 600, I was blowing kisses to her the whole way. She was, I don't know. I just can't believe what's just happened.
The former Ireland coach, New Zealander Joe Schmidt, will join the Blues coaching staff in a support role for next year's Super Rugby competition. He's a former Blues assistant coach and is returning in a part-time role to assist head coach Leon McDonald.
I'm really looking forward to getting back to the Blues. It seems like a long time ago, and I've been full circle after working my way around the coaching world, really. I've enjoyed doing a little bit of work with Leon last year, and hopefully we can make a really positive impression in Super Rugby Pacific.
Joe Schmidt coached Ireland from 2013 to 2019, winning 3 Six Nations titles. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, episode 2 of Let's Be Transparent. Joe Stockhausen's transition from female to male. This evening, appearance. When it comes to gender, it's more than skin deep. And economist Brian Fallow looks at what the COP26 climate talks might mean for New Zealand, especially if the world opts to tackle methane ahead of carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, making methane is something we're rather too good at. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, long fine spells. A period of rain tomorrow morning, possibly heavy, then scattered falls. Bay of Plenty, the central North Island high country, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Cloud increasing today with a few showers in the east. Rain developing overnight, scattered in the west, but heavy falls for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Waikato to Taranaki, long fine spells. Cloudy tomorrow with showers in the ranges. Whanganui to Wellington, also Wairarapa, partly cloudy with isolated showers. Marlborough and Canterbury mostly cloudy, scattered rain mainly inland, clearing from the south tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the South Island, partly cloudy, isolated showers clearing this evening, and for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few evening showers and cloud increasing tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. And if you're just joining us, there is a lot to catch up on. The far north of Northland will go into alert level 3 lockdown from 11:59pm tonight until at least next Monday. This is following an unlinked community case of COVID-19. Speaking at the Beehive a short time ago, COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins said no epidemiological link has been found in relation to 2 positive cases in Taipa. One case was identified today and the second is a household contact and was identified yesterday. If you don't know where Taipa is, it's about 30 kilometres northeast of Kaitaia. The 2 cases had not been near any of the locations of interest in Northland or come into contact with any other cases in Northland. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, said that was concerning and indicated a missing link in the train of transmission, or that someone with COVID had travelled from outside the area. Now, Northland has one of the country's lowest vaccination rates and is more than 17,000 doses short of reaching the 90% first dose target. Minister Hipkins said it could be February before the region meets the 90% double dose target. A border boundary will be in place. It's going to go through the Hokianga Harbour across to the Mangamoka Gorge and Kaiō. Minister Hipkins says vaccinations are key to avoiding a Christmas lockdown. Now, our reporter Nita Blake-Person is in Kawakawa and joins me now. Nita, what's the kind of feeling on the street?
Well, in Kawakawa, we are in the not lockdown zone come midnight tonight. So people here, there's probably a little bit of a sigh of relief. I was walking through Kawakawa's main street before speaking to people. This is news, obviously. Most people were just heading home to grab tea and had seen the Prime Minister here today. It was all about vaccination rates. And this has come a little bit out of the blue. But a couple that I spoke to kind of seem resigned to the idea of coming in and out of alert level changes. This isn't the first time this has happened for the north. We were in alert level 3 a couple of weeks ago, level 2, and it's kind of hung over the region, if you will, for a little bit because we've had these cases popping up, but up until now, they've all been traceable. So this nervousness around where these type of cases have connected in with those low vaccination rates, obviously it was too high of a risk, and level 3 from midnight.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about what is concerning health authorities about these 2 particular cases. Because from memory, you've got a total of about 14 now. So why go harder now?
That's right. The 14 that we've had, the number has been kind of rising over the last little while. A few have come across the border, but they've been totally traceable, and there's been no, concerns. Unlike those first 2 with the visitors we had to the north, who we knew it eventuated that they had falsified documents and things. These are people who have been legitimately crossing the border, but because Delta is so transmissible, despite positive tests, negative COVID tests and things like that, it has managed to make its way north. Now, these type of ones, though, don't have any links, and so the risk of there possibly being community transmission and trains of transmission that we don't know anything about in Northland is a pretty daunting prospect when, as we keep hearing, vaccination rates are so low here. I was just checking before and my notes say 79% first doses, 65% 2 doses, and those numbers are lower for Māori, 67% 1 dose and 48% 2 doses. And that was really why Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was in the north today along with local MPs to try and rally behind some of the iwi health providers who are working so hard to get those rates up high. But it is a slog. As you can see, there are a lot of doses to get going, and Delta is bearing down on us.
Yeah, and the Minister was saying, I think it was 11,000 Māori remain unvaccinated in the region. Now, you mentioned the Prime Minister's visit, right? It was a bit of a window, wasn't it, into what they're up against. Tell us what happened.
It was a bit of a window. We travelled with her to several of the iwi health providers today, and that was the cool window. That's, when you're seeing the fantastic work that's going on the ground and the conversations to reassure people around vaccines and the great initiatives. Hauora Hokianga today over in Tāhiki, along with vaccines, are handing out a kind of a kit which has plants for the garden as well as a whole bunch of things for you to take home with your vaccine. So that was some of the cool stuff that the Prime Minister got a window in today. But some of the other stuff, when we were here in Kawakawa, there were some really loud protesters. There weren't a lot of them, but one man who was posing as a journalist spouted a whole bunch of falsified claims at the Prime Minister, and she was really at pains to state that these are a small group but a loud group. But I think it is important to recognise how loud they are here in the north, because that is what a lot of people are saying is contributing to some of the vaccine hesitancy here. So it is hard work getting some people vaccinated right now.
Thank you, Nita. That is Nita Blake-Person, who joins us from Kawakawa. It's 13 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. National's Deputy Leader, Dr Shane Reti, is in Opanoni, which is on the boundary of the new lockdown area, and he joins me now. Dr Reti, so are you in or out? Will you be in level 3 or level 2 as of 11:59pm tonight?
Good evening. I'm out. I'm inside level 2. Outside level 3, and I'm looking across at the new boundary across the harbour as we speak right now.
So, is this the only choice that the government had to go into this lockdown?
Look, without having the data, it's hard to make a call, but certainly in the context of Northland having low vaccination rates and having the greatest number to get to 90%, I can understand why they'd want to exercise caution. We need to do wide and deep testing now to see how far this could or might be. And so I do understand their caution, but we don't have the figures to make a comment as to whether we would do the same.
You seem like you've got a canine friend there that may not be quite so happy with the decision. I'm wondering if you can sort of shuffle away from them, because we do want to hear what you're saying.
I certainly can. So you have to understand, I'm at the Opanoni pub, and as we weigh things up today, let's remember an hour ago, all through Northland, all the communities were at the pubs watching the Melbourne Cup. And whether or not that becomes a feature, who knows, but just offering an observation.
Yeah, okay, so how crowded was it there?
Crowded. As I'm sure every local pub was all around the Hokianga. It's the big day, the big moment, and it was crowded here as well.
So, given that you're in a big group, what were locals saying about the news that there are these two, untracked cases, if you like, and the fact that the far north is facing lockdown?
So I was here at 6 o'clock, and many of them were seeing it for the first time on the television and hearing it for the first time. I have to say a pragmatic approach from the locals. Most went to their phones, figuring out if they were going on the ferry like I was supposed to be tomorrow morning, what their business arrangements were going to be. There's still people on the phone here now trying to figure out how to arrange tomorrow and probably right through until Monday. But very, very pragmatic, no surprise. A lot of people saying, yes, of course, we've been at risk. So it wasn't a no drama, just a very pragmatic approach from the locals.
So you've been on the vaccination front line, right? And now you're up in Northland. The rates there are low, right? And the Minister has said on those kinds of projections, Northland won't get to 90% potentially until February of next year. How can you turn that around?
It will be a struggle. If we look at the baseline, which is those children under 2, where the parents have said do not vaccinate them and take them off the register. If we use that as a proxy for what they might want for themselves, Northland is first equal with Bay of Plenty at about 11% of don't vaccinate. That's going to make it hard to get to the 90% anyway. If you add a proportion of that onto the hesitant group, I suspect it's about 15%, which maybe maximises us at 85%. It's going to be hard here. It's going to be challenged here in Northland to get to 90%.
Do you think it's unachievable?
No, I like to lift my eyes to the horizon and believe everything's achievable. So I think it is achievable. It's just going to be hard.
In terms of the border, does this need to be a tight, hard border here? Because we've had problems with people crossing back and forth. And in fact, this is arguably how COVID first got into Northland, from a porous border.
So you can't really have border light. It's either a border or it's not a border. And if it's a border, then it should be an efficient border. I'm of a view it should be rapid antigen testing, and most of us are, that we should be rapid antigen testing either side of that border. A border's a border. Like I say, you can't do border light.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is Dr. Shane Reti, who's the Deputy Leader of the National Party. Now to the US now, where the White House says 80% of US adults have had at least one dose of a COVID vaccine as a mandate comes into force. Over the past month, cases dropped by 35% and deaths have fallen 32%. CNN's Alexandra Field reports.
More proof the mandates are working.
Since we announced the mandate just days ago, 22,472 new vaccinations among our city employees.
91% of New York City's municipal workforce is now vaccinated. Police, EMS, sanitation workers, and the fire department all seeing big gains in vaccination rates since the mayor announced the mandate 12 days ago.
Anyone who hasn't so far, there's still a chance to fix it. Come in, get vaccinated, come back to work, because we need everyone to do their job and we need everyone to be safe.
9,000 city workers who didn't get the shot are now at home on unpaid leave. Mayor Bill de Blasio says there have been no interruptions to police, sanitation, and fire services, and no firehouses have closed. That's even with 2,300 firefighters calling out sick today, double to triple the usual number. The FDNY says it's seen higher than normal numbers of sickouts since the mandate was announced. The firefighters union still opposing the mandate.
We're hoping fire coverage is not impinged upon, but it's very hard to say this time.
The battle over mandates is playing out against the backdrop of a big milestone. The White House says 80% of adults in the U.S. have received their first shot. Nearly 70% of adults are now fully vaccinated. New COVID cases continue to fall. Hospitalizations are under 50,000 for the first time in 3 months. New vaccine mandates for federal workers, large employers, and healthcare workers are set to take effect December 8th. The Biden administration is pushing ahead with that plan despite calls to push the deadline to 2022.
It would be a mistake.
Military service members are also now facing vaccine mandates. The deadline for the Air Force is just a day away. More than 96% of active duty members are now vaccinated.
The far north of Northland is heading into Alert Level 3 lockdown from 11:59pm tonight. It's because 2 cases have emerged that are unlinked to the previous cluster, and these cases are in Taipa. They haven't visited locations of interest shared by the other cases or had contact with those cases. So there's now concern that there could be uncontrolled community spread. A border is being established which passes through the Hokianga, and we'll put the details up on our website. But the far north Mayor John Carter told Checkpoint earlier that low vaccine rates means the lockdown is necessary.
It's disappointing, but it's the right decision, and we need to keep people safe. That's the first thing. We need people to be sensible, to keep their distancing, to wear their masks, Lisa. We also need them to be tested if they're unwell, and most importantly, please go and get vaccinated. That's the reason why we have to do this, is because we need to get our vaccination level up. Lisa, can I just say that because of what's happened in the last 2 days, people are frightened. It will have a negative impact on our businesses, but because there was concern in the district that there was COVID anyway, people were concerned and businesses were already being affected. We're hoping that this will give us a breathing space. We're hoping that we will be able to make sure that we've got a link, and that Cabinet will reconsider this on Monday.
And that's the Far North Mayor, John Carter, there. And the boundary is going to be put in place from the centre of the Hokianga Harbour to the Mangamuka Junction on State Highway 1 to the Kyle River Bridge on State Highway 10 and East Bay. Below the boundary line stays in 2, above it goes to 3 at 11:59 tonight. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's tried to stir world leaders into action by comparing the world's climate crisis to a James Bond movie with a ticking doomsday clock. He's opened the UN climate conference in Glasgow by warning the talks are at an historic point and that our children will not forgive us if we don't act now. The ABC's Steve Carnane reports.
In Glasgow, a call to arms to take bold action on climate change.
We are in roughly the same position as James Bond, except this is not a movie, and the doomsday device is real. It's 1 minute to midnight on that doomsday clock, and we need to act now.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson led the charge, urging more than 120 world leaders in attendance to act and invoking biblical consequences if nothing was done.
2 degrees more and we jeopardise the food supply for hundreds of millions of people as crops wither, locusts swarm. 3 degrees and you can add more wildfires and cyclones, twice as many, 5 times as many droughts and 36 times as many heat waves. 4 degrees and we say goodbye to whole cities. Miami, Alexandria, Shanghai, all lost beneath the waves.
Brianna Fruin has been a climate activist for Pacific communities since the age of 11. Now a university student, the Samoan had a message for all those leaders attending the UN conference.
I don't need to remind you the reality of vulnerable communities. If you're here today, you know what climate change is doing to us. You don't need my pain or my tears to know that we're in a crisis.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres told the summit that he stood with young activists like Brianna Fruin. He pointed out that in the 6 years since the Paris Agreement, we'd seen the 6 hottest years on record, and said our addiction to fossil fuels was pushing humanity to the brink.
Either we stop it or it stops us. And it's time to say enough. Enough of brutalizing biodiversity. Enough of killing ourselves with carbon. Enough of treating nature like a toilet. Enough of burning and drilling and mining our way deeper. We are digging our own graves.
Later in the day, Prime Minister Scott Morrison updated the COP on what commitments Australia had made to reduce emissions. He's failed to bring to this conference what Boris Johnson asked of all leaders from industrialised countries. That is, ambitious cuts for at least 50% by 2030. Instead, he's betting on the private sector.
Technology will have the answers to a decarbonised economy, particularly over time, and achieve it in a way that does not deny our citizens, especially in developing economies, their livelihoods or the opportunity for a better quality of life.
Hugs, tears and lots of emotion. That was the mood at airports yesterday as Australia eased international border restrictions for the first time since 2020. But while citizens and permanent residents can now travel to and from Australia without quarantining, those on temporary visas can't. Some have waited years to see family overseas and they're devastated by a lack of certainty around the issue. The ABC's Claudia Long has more.
Watching emotional embraces as families reunited at airports in Sydney and Melbourne has been heartbreaking for lawyer Chase Arneson, who's living here on a temporary visa.
I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
The Canadian citizen moved from Singapore to Australia for work in 2019, and being separated from his family since Australia's international border slammed shut early last year has been really hard. He can't understand why the eased border restrictions don't extend to temporary residents too.
Initially, my expectation was that we would just be included. We found out that temporary residents like ourselves, even though we've been here for several years, aren't able to leave and go see our families. That was, I think the best way to describe it is just like a gut punch, just absolutely suffocating. It just feels cruel, frankly. It's been 2 years now. Haven't seen nieces and nephews in 2.5 years. So in at least one case, that's more than half his life.
There are over 1.6 million temporary residents in Australia, but very few have been granted permits to leave and re-enter the country since the pandemic began. Chase Arneson would dearly love to know when that will change.
If there was a very clear plan and a very clear date that was in detail on paper, I could learn to live with it, but it's the complete lack of clarity. Of course, my dad's in his 70s now, so that's where it really starts to get to that point of how much longer can we hold on?
In a statement, the Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews says she knows a range of visa holders have been separated from friends and family, and that's why she's looking forward to further easing restrictions over coming weeks and months as vaccination rates continue to climb. But not everyone is satisfied with that.
There's simply no justification that people who are on temporary visas have no idea of when they'll be able to travel or no idea of when they'll be able to come into the country.
David Burke is the legal director at the Human Rights Law Centre.
There are so many people who are our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues who haven't been able to visit their children overseas. They've been separated for more than a year and a half simply because of the visa that they hold.
He wants to see the rules changed as soon as possible.
It is an incredible thing that after the past year and a half, people are able to reconnect with their loved ones. They're able to see their family again and see people overseas. But we need to make this a moment that everyone can experience.
In the meantime, temporary residents have set up a petition, hoping to put pressure on the federal government to change the rules soon.
Let's get to some of your feedback before we head off. Michael's been in touch, and this is about Northland, the far north going into lockdown. Michael says, for those in the North Hokianga, if they cannot travel across the Kohu ferry to Rawene Hospital, it is a long ride, over an hour, to Kaitaia. I hope no one needs help in the next few days. On some councillors being abused for supporting vaccination drives, Martin from Blenheim's got in touch to say it is heartbreaking to hear people being harassed for supporting their communities. It seems ignorance and associated stupid behaviours are more contagious and dangerous than the virus. Kim says it's appalling that councillors and vaccinators and many other people are being personally harassed and threatened. A different opinion is one thing, but threats, harassment and property damage needs to be firmly stopped. Free speech doesn't include threats and shouldn't include deliberate lies or personal attacks. I hope the law is always enforced, and maybe the law needs some tweezers if people are feeling unsafe due to trying to help in the community. On the subject of Northland, so the northern parts of Northland moved to alert level 3 at 11:59pm tonight. The COVID minister is saying people have to stay at home in their bubble. Please monitor for symptoms and get tested if you are not feeling well. It's also being recommended that you wear a face covering when leaving the house, and please use the COVID Tracer app. Vaccination rates in Auckland are currently low compared to other areas. First doses, 79%. 65% for second doses, and they need people to get tested so they can work out whether there is any undetected community cases. So please, they are asking to get tested. And there is information on people needing to travel outside of those areas for work. So go to the Unite Against COVID-19 website for all the details about where you can travel and how. And ko te kaupapa tuatahi a popo, tomorrow from 5am, First Up has reaction from the far north as it wakes up in lockdown. And they're also going to be live at Hamilton Zoo, which is preparing to open on Friday in step 2 of level 3. Thank you for all your feedback and staying with us this evening. Kaua e wareware te atatero I a mātou kōrero. Check out our stories online.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The northern part of Northland is to go into alert level 3 from midnight tonight till at least Monday, after a new community case earlier today. While it's a household contact of an existing case, contact tracers have been unable to find any link to other infections in the cluster. Far North Mayor John Carter has told Checkpoint the decision to plunge the area into lockdown is disappointing, but the right call. The Speaker has dropped requirements for MPs returning to Wellington to isolate for 5 days. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
We don't have a level, it's just locked down.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
He's not afraid of stating what he feels, Shane McGowan. I think that's one of the great delights about the man.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Karen. I'm Brian Crump, back for another night on RNZ National, which commences officially after the news at 7. My guest will be Brian Fallow in the next hour, the economist, former economics editor or was it business editor? I'm not sure, but he's been a journalist as well as an economist for many years, writing for a long time for the New Zealand Herald. And he's talking tonight about COP26, yes, those climate change talks in Glasgow you're probably aware of. And among other things, the possibility that fellow nations will decide that the easiest way to reduce our fossil fuels quickly is to cut back on methane emissions rather than carbon dioxide, because for some of them it's easier. Unfortunately for New Zealand, it's the opposite. It's probably harder for us to reduce our methane because so much of it comes from one of the main creators of wealth for this country, dairying. I'll talk with Brian about that